Germany flew over 80 different aircraft during World War II. Fighters that terrorized Allied pilots. Bombers that flattened cities. Experimental jets that arrived too late. Transport workhorses that kept the war machine running, and even helicopters. This is the complete German aviation arsenal of the Second World War, starting with fighters and interceptors. Messerschmitt, Bf 101, the backbone of the Luftwaffe from 1939 until Germany's collapse in 1945. This single-engine fighter evolved constantly throughout the war, with new variants appearing every year to counter Allied improvements. It served on every major front, from the Battle of Britain to the defense of Berlin. Fast, nimble, and produced in staggering numbers, over 30,000 built. The problem is the cockpit was cramped and visibility was poor compared to later Allied designs. But it remained competitive until the end because German pilots knew how to exploit its strengths in vertical combat. Focke-Wulf, FW-190. Allied pilots called it the butcher bird, for good reason. When it appeared in 1941, it outclassed the Spitfire Mark V in almost every category. This radial engine fighter was robust, heavily armed, and offered excellent visibility from the bubble canopy. It could absorb tremendous battle damage and keep flying. The FW-190 gave the Luftwaffe a crucial performance edge during the middle years of the war. Later variants served as fighter bombers and ground attack aircraft. It works. Focke-Wulf Te-152, Kurt Tank's late-war masterpiece designed specifically for high-altitude interception. This long-winged evolution of the FW-190 featured a pressurized cockpit and boosted engine for fighting above 30,000 feet. Incredibly fast and sleek, only a handful ever reached operational units before Germany surrendered. The few pilots who flew it considered it the finest piston engine fighter Germany ever produced. Messerschmitt, Bf 110, the famous Zerstörer, meaning destroyer. Early in the war, this twin-engine heavy fighter performed well in Poland and France, where it faced limited opposition. Then came the Battle of Britain. British Spitfires and Hurricanes tore the Bf 110 formations apart. Too slow, too heavy, not maneuverable enough. The Luftwaffe pulled it from daylight operations, but the aircraft found new life as a night fighter. Equipped with radar and heavy cannons, it became one of the most effective tools against RAF bombing raids over Germany. Moving on to the Messerschmitt Me 210, a troubled design intended to replace the Bf 110. Severe aerodynamic instability made it nearly unflyable in early versions. Pilots reported uncontrollable stalls and spins. Production was halted. The airframe was completely reworked into the successful Me 410, a costly failure that delayed Germany's heavy fighter program by years. Messerschmitt Me 410, known as the Hornet. This twin-engine machine finally solved the stability disasters of the Me 210. It served effectively as a reconnaissance platform, fast bomber, and heavy fighter, armed with multiple cannons and sometimes additional pods carrying heavy weapons. It could engage Allied bombers head-on with devastating firepower. The problem is, by 1943, when the Allied escort fighters were everywhere and the Me 410 was still vulnerable in dogfights. Heinkel He-51, an older biplane fighter that saw service in the Spanish Civil War. By the time World War II began, it was completely obsolete for frontline combat, relegated almost entirely to advanced training roles. Some were used for ground attack in Poland, but that was it. A museum piece. Messerschmitt Me 262, the Schwalbe Swallow, the world's first operational turbojet fighter. Its speed made it nearly invulnerable to Allied piston engine planes, over 100 miles per hour faster than a Mustang. Armed with 4 30mm cannons, it could shred a bomber formation in seconds. The Me 262 represented a true revolution in aviation. The problem is, Hitler initially demanded it be used as a bomber, delaying its deployment as a fighter. Engine reliability was terrible. jet engines lasted only 10 to 25 hours before failure. Fuel shortages and constant Allied bombing of airfields meant most Me-262s were destroyed on the ground. It arrived too late and in too few numbers to change the war's outcome. Heinkel, HEO-162, the extremely desperate Volksjäger, People's Fighter program. This jet was designed to be built quickly and cheaply out of non-strategic materials like wood. The idea was to mass-produce thousands and arm Hitler Youth pilots with minimal training. It was often flown by inexperienced young pilots who had no business flying a jet. The aircraft was tricky to handle and prone to structural failures. Dangerous but a symbol of Germany's collapse. Messerschmitt Me-163, the infamous Comet, the only rocket-powered fighter aircraft ever to see operational service. Its speed was incredible, nearly 600 miles per hour in level flight. But the volatile rocket fuel was incredibly dangerous. The fuel mixture could explode on landing, and it often did, killing pilots. Pilots had only minutes of powered flight before the fuel ran out. Then it became a glider, effective against bomber formations if the pilot survived takeoff and landing, a death trap. Bachem Beek 349 Natter, a radical concept, a vertical takeoff rocket interceptor. The pilot was strapped into what was essentially a manned missile, launched vertically from a rail and guided toward incoming bomber formations. After firing its rockets, the pilot was supposed to bail out and parachute to safety while the aircraft itself crashed. It was intended for short-burst, almost suicidal defense missions. Only one manned test flight occurred, and the pilot was killed. The war ended before it saw combat, completely insane. Heinkel He-219, known as the Uhu, Owl, this was arguably the most effective dedicated night fighter in the Luftwaffe. Twin-engine, heavily armed, and the first German aircraft fitted with ejection seats. It featured advanced radar and excellent performance at night. Pilots loved it. The problem is, production was limited due to bureaucratic infighting and competing priorities. Only a few hundred were built. Dornier, Do 335, the extraordinary Feel Arrow. This heavy fighter had a unique push-pull engine configuration, one engine in the nose, one in the tail. It was incredibly fast, holding the distinction as the fastest piston-engine aircraft Germany ever built, nearly 470 miles per hour. Armed with heavy cannons and nearly impossible to intercept, but it arrived too late in the war to make any impact. Dangerous, but too little, too late. Continuing with bombers and attack aircraft. Junkers Ju-87, the notorious Stuka dive bomber. Its terrifying Jericho trumpet siren became the sound of blitzkrieg during the invasions of Poland and France. Highly accurate in the dive bombing role, capable of hitting pinpoint targets, but it was slow, lightly armed, and proved highly vulnerable without air superiority. Once the Luftwaffe lost control of the skies, Stukas were slaughtered. It became obsolete by 1942. Junkers Ju-88, the primary bomber version of the most versatile aircraft in German service, fast and adaptable, used for level bombing, dive bombing, torpedo attacks, night fighting, and reconnaissance. Over 15,000 built in dozens of variants, it could do everything. The problem is, it was still vulnerable to modern fighters, especially when used as a bomber without heavy escort. Junkers Ju-188, the Wrecker, Avenger version, an intermediate development based on the Ju-88 with a new glass nose design and higher performance engines. Better speed, better range, better defensive armament. It served effectively in reconnaissance and bombing roles late in the war. It works. Junkers Ju-86, an earlier generation bomber that saw limited use in the 1930s and early World War II. It was famously adapted into a specialized high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft capable of flying above 40,000 feet, beyond the reach of most interceptors. Unarmed, it relied entirely on altitude for survival. Some models served until 1943, Dornier Do 17. The famous flying pencil. This medium bomber relied on its speed for survival in the early war. Its narrow fuselage gave it a distinct silhouette. It served during the Battle of Britain but was quickly outclassed by faster, better-armed bombers. Withdrawn from frontline service by 1942, Dornier Do-215. A development of the Do-17 initially planned for export but absorbed into the Luftwaffe for crucial reconnaissance tasks. Fitted with cameras and additional fuel tanks. Limited production. Dornier Do-217, a powerful, larger bomber design that saw extensive use as a bomber, night fighter, and anti-shipping aircraft. Known for its robustness and heavy payload, some variants carried radio-controlled glide bombs used to sink Allied warships in the Mediterranean. It was reliable and effective throughout the war. Heinkel, He-111. One of the iconic shapes of the early German Air Force, recognizable by its distinctive glazed greenhouse nose. It served as the Luftwaffe's primary medium bomber during the Battle of Britain, later used for transport duties and launching V-1 flying bombs. Reliable but increasingly vulnerable to Allied fighters as the war dragged on. Heinkel, He-177, the massive Griffin. Germany's only true long-range heavy bomber to cease service. Plagued by severe engine reliability issues and notorious fires caused by the paired engine design. Despite the troubles, it was the closest thing Germany had to a strategic bomber. Production delays and mechanical failures limited its impact. Arado R-234, known as the Blitz, Lightning, the world's first jet-powered bomber and reconnaissance aircraft, so fast that intercepting it was virtually impossible. Used for high-speed reconnaissance over Britain and bombing runs during the final months of the war. Almost untouchable, but produced in limited numbers. Heinkel, HS-123, a rugged biplane dive bomber considered obsolete in 1939. Yet its incredible toughness and maneuverability ensured it served as an effective close support aircraft on the Eastern Front until 1944. Pilots loved it for low-level attacks against ground targets. It just wouldn't quit. Heinkel HS-129, the dedicated tank buster nicknamed the Can Opener. This twin-engine aircraft was heavily armored and often carried a massive 30mm or even 75mm cannon, designed specifically to destroy Soviet tanks, slow and vulnerable to fighters but devastating against armor when it reached the target. Focke-Wulf FW-190F. This version was optimized specifically for the Schlachtflieger ground attack role, heavily armored to shrug off flak and carry substantial bomb loads, used extensively on the Eastern Front for close air support. Focke-Wulf FW-190G, a long-range FW-190 fighter bomber variant stripped of some heavy fighter weapons to maximize fuel capacity for deep penetration missions. Used for hit-and-run attacks behind enemy lines. Focke-Wulf FW-200 Condor, known by Winston Churchill as the Scourge of the Atlantic. This long-range patrol bomber hunted Allied convoys and directed U-boats to their targets. Armed with bombs and capable of flying for hours over the ocean, it was a serious threat to Allied shipping until improved convoy defenses and long-range fighters neutralized it. Heinkel He-115, a very reliable twin-engine seaplane. Operated extensively in coastal areas performing mine-laying, torpedo attacks, and long-range reconnaissance missions. Versatile and dependable throughout the war. Moving on to transport and utility aircraft. Junkers Ju-52, the legendary Tante U, Auntie Junkers. This tri-motor transport was the tireless workhorse of the Luftwaffe, essential in every theater from Crete to Stalingrad. Slow, unarmed and vulnerable, but it kept German forces supplied. Over 5,000 built, used for paratroop drops, cargo transport, and medical evacuation. It works. Junkers Ju-290. A powerful, very long-range four-engine transport and maritime reconnaissance aircraft developed directly from the Ju-90 bomber concept, used for transoceanic reconnaissance and as Hitler's personal transport. Only a few dozen built. Junkers Ju-160, a single-engine fast passenger aircraft from the 1930s. saw minor service early in the war, mainly for high-speed liaison and staff transport. Messerschmitt, Me, 323, the truly immense giant. This six-engine transport was capable of carrying enormous loads, including light tanks and thousands of pounds of supplies. Essentially a powered glider with engines bolted on. Extremely vulnerable to fighter attack. Allied pilots called it easy prey, Arado R-232, known as the Tausendfüßler millipede. This modern transport featured an innovative multi-wheel landing gear that allowed it to operate from very rough, unprepared airstrips. Excellent design, but only a few were produced. Junkers Ju-90, a large four-engine passenger airliner converted for military transport. Precursor to the Ju-290 maritime patrol aircraft. Siebel Se-204, a popular light transport and multi-engine crew trainer used extensively for high-speed liaison duties across occupied Europe. Messerschmitt Bf-108, known as the Typhoon. This elegant low-wing monoplane was used primarily for fast communication and liaison. It was the design basis for the later Bf-109 fighter. Thousands served as courier aircraft and trainers. Fieseler Phi 156 Storch, the famous Stork. This remarkable aircraft possessed exceptional short takeoff and landing capabilities. It could virtually hover and land almost anywhere, making it invaluable for command liaison and rescue missions. One of the most beloved German aircraft of the war, Siebel Foch 104, a modern twin-engine communications and liaison aircraft, generally used for transporting high-ranking staff officers quickly between headquarters. Junkers W-34, a rugged, successful single-engine utility transport primarily used for training roles and carrying small priority cargo loads. Junkers W-33, an influential single-engine transport aircraft from the pre-World War II era, used mostly for training pilots who would later fly the larger Junkers transports. Heinkel He-46, an older parasol-wing reconnaissance biplane, largely retired by 1940, but saw initial scouting service during the Polish campaign. Clem Kiel-35, one of a series of light civilian aircraft that were militarized for basic communications and liaison duties during the war. Clem Kiel-32, a highly successful, slightly larger three-seater version of the Clem family, praised for its high performance for a light wooden aircraft. Clem Kiel-36, a four-seat light touring aircraft designed for racing in military service. It filled light communications and fast transport roles, continuing with reconnaissance and maritime aircraft. Focke-Wulf FW-189, the outstanding reconnaissance aircraft known as the Flying Eye. Its twin-boom glass-intensive design gave the crew an exceptional field of view for battlefield observation. Pilots on the Eastern Front relied on it heavily for target spotting and artillery direction, nearly impossible to replace. Heinkel HS-126, a high-wing monoplane initially used for tactical observation and short-range reconnaissance, gradually replaced by the FW-189 as better aircraft became available. Arado R-234B, the dedicated reconnaissance version of the jet bomber. Its incredible speed allowed it to photograph Allied preparations over Britain without risk of interception. No Allied fighter could catch it. Heinkel A-70. The Blitz Lightning. This aircraft was famed for its speed as a fast civilian mail plane. In military service, adapted for reconnaissance and liaison. Dornier Do-17P, a specific version of the flying pencil, optimized for long-range photo reconnaissance, fitted with special cameras and extra fuel tanks. Blom and Voss BV-138, known unofficially as the Flying Shoe due to its unique shape. This sturdy tri-motor flying boat was vital for long-range maritime patrol and reconnaissance over the Atlantic. Operated from Norway and coastal bases hunting Allied convoys. Blom and Voss BV-222, the colossal Viking, one of the largest flying boats built during World War II, served almost exclusively as a long-range maritime transport aircraft, ferrying supplies to North Africa and evacuating wounded. Dornier Do 24. A very effective tri-motor flying boat renowned for its excellent sea-keeping capability. Used primarily for search and rescue operations, saving hundreds of downed air crew. Dornier Do 18, a sturdy flying boat design, one of the first aircraft employed for reconnaissance patrols over the North Sea and the Atlantic at the start of the war. Dornier Do 26, a handsome 4-engine flying boat with highly advanced retractable auxiliary flotation gear, used sparingly for long-range transport and reconnaissance. Heinkel 59. This large twin-float biplane was initially used for reconnaissance. It gained notoriety when disguised as an air-sea rescue aircraft for intelligence gathering, violating neutrality agreements. Heinkel E-60, an aging biplane seaplane utilized for shipboard reconnaissance, launched via catapult, largely replaced by the superior Arado R-196. Arado R-196, the standard catapult-launched seaplane aboard major German warships, extremely effective, successfully engaging and destroying several Allied submarines and patrol vessels, reliable and well-armed for its size. Heinkel He-114, an obsolescent biplane floatplane that served briefly as a coastal reconnaissance aircraft, rapidly phased out as better monoplanes became available. Continuing with gliders, DFS-22RE, the assault glider famous for the raid on the Belgian fortress of Eben-Emael, a crucial silent transport method for airborne forces in the early war. Delivered German paratroopers directly onto fortress rooftops in Belgium. Later used in Crete and other airborne operations. Gotha Go-242, a large twin-boom troop and cargo glider heavily used for supply missions, particularly on the Eastern Front, before powered transports were more available. Messerschmitt Me 321, the largest glider of the war, designed to carry heavy equipment or 200 soldiers. Its immense size required the use of multiple tow aircraft, or the specially designed He-111Z towing combination, difficult to operate and highly vulnerable. Moving on to trainers. Focke-Wulf 131, the famous Jungmann, young man. This primary trainer biplane was exceptionally responsive and helped establish the superb standards of early Luftwaffe pilot training. Thousands of pilots learned to fly in this aircraft. Focke-Wulf 133, the incredible Jungmeister, young master. This advanced aerobatic trainer was legendary for its agility. It refined the skills of the Luftwaffe's most talented fighter pilots. Considered one of the finest aerobatic aircraft ever built. Heinkel He-72, known as the Cadet. This biplane was one of the essential primary trainers of the new German Air Force in the 1930s. Clem Kehl 35, a widely used basic and advanced trainer in the 1930s and early World War II. Its forgiving handling made it ideal for student pilots. Arado R-96, a single-engine advanced monoplane trainer used to introduce student pilots to the handling characteristics of modern operational aircraft. Focke-Wulf FW-44, known as the Stieglitz Goldfinch, a hugely successful and popular primary biplane trainer. Many future Luftwaffe aces learned their trade in this aircraft. Focke-Wulf FW-56, known as the Stosser Shrike, a single-seat parasol wing monoplane, served mainly as a transition trainer for pilots moving into fighter aircraft. Focke-Wulf 181, known as the Best Man. This low-wing trainer was intended to teach pilots the characteristics of modern monoplane fighters. Arado R-76, a small single-seat parasol wing monoplane, designed as both a fighter trainer and potentially an emergency defensive fighter. Gotha Go-145, a basic, robust, two-seater biplane trainer. Like many older trainers, it saw late war service as a night attack aircraft, dropping small bombs on the Eastern Front. Arado R-66, a venerable biplane trainer, despite its age, surprisingly utilized as a light nuisance bomber on the Eastern Front, harassing Soviet ground troops at night. Focke-Wulf FW-58, a popular twin-engine aircraft used widely for crew training, light transport, and air ambulance roles. Its versatility made it a valuable utility machine. Siebel C-2A2, a light civilian two-seater aircraft pressed into service for initial flight screening and basic training roles during the war. Finally, helicopters and autogyros. Focke-Wulf FA-223, the Dragon, a pioneering twin-rotor transport helicopter built in small numbers and demonstrated impressive lifting capability. Could carry cargo internally or externally, a glimpse of the future. Flettner FL-282, known as the Colibri, Hummingbird, a groundbreaking reconnaissance helicopter utilizing the Flettner synchronized rotor system, deployed on warships for observation, excellent stability, and visibility. Focke-Wulf FA-330. This highly unusual design was a small, collapsible, rotary wing kite, deployed by U-boats to provide much-needed aerial observation while surfaced far out in the Atlantic, towed behind the submarine like a kite. Simple but effective. Germany's aviation arsenal in World War II ranged from legendary fighters like the Bf-109 to experimental jets that hinted at the future, from rugged workhorses like the U-52 to desperate late-war projects like the Volksjäger. Which aircraft stands out to you? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for the next military catalog.